Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Five Star Revolution podcast with your host, CJ Price. Welcome to another great episode. Go join us on Facebook, Five Star Revolution Podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel right now. Tonight, we have a Texas legend. His name is Rudy Gonzalez. How are you doing tonight, sir?
How you guys doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing real good.
So this is an icebreaker that I like to do with every guest that comes on my show. You're gonna be no different. I want to know, were you a fan of pro wrestling growing up? And if so, who were some of your favorites?
I was not a fan of pro wrestling when I was growing up. I had no interest in it. My dad took me to some matches um, when I was about 10, 11, 12 years old, and I wasn't into it. It wasn't until I got out of high school and my high school football coach knew the promoter who was Joe Blanchard, um, and he directed me then that way to do some training during the off season because I was doing junior college football, and so I went with the idea of training with the Southwest Championship Wrestling Academy for 2 weeks, and never went back. I that's where I started, and I never left.
So who was your original trainer when you first started?
My original trainer was a guy named Larry Lane. He was storyline wise, he was the cousin of the Funks. He was actually all Army wrestling champion, like shoot wrestling, all Army wrestling champion. He was Rocky Mountain wrestling champion. He was like a big time uh, shooter. So the first like several months of training was just wrestling, not a couple of weeks of running the ropes and then taking bumps and then headlocks. And I mean, we were actually doing wrestling. So I do have a little bit, thank God also, I do have a little bit of wrestling background with me, but I by no means do I consider myself a shooter.
And back then it was hard to get into the business, right?
Oh, exactly. Like one time after I started doing some matches and stuff, I was standing next to I don't know, Scott Casey or somebody. We're watching the matches from the back of the building. And oh no, I'm sorry, it was Ken Timms. And we were watching the matches from the back of the building. And me and Ken Timms would work out in the mornings, like from 10 o'clock till noon or something. And we'd do a lot of like cardio stuff. And so a fan came up and he said, "Hey man," he asked Ken Timms. I was a bottom guy. I didn't nobody knew me, nobody cared who I was. He asked Ken Timms, "Hey man, how do I get into wrestling?" And Ken Timms said, "I don't know. I have no idea." And the guy goes, and he goes, "Isn't there a place here in San Antonio?" And Ken Timms said, "Not that I know of." He goes, "Do you know Rudy?" And I'm like, I don't know. And so the guy said, "Oh, okay." So he walked off, and I looked at Ken. I'm like, "Why didn't you tell him that we train in the mornings?" And he said, "Why should I?" And I was like, "I don't know." So later on, he explained to me that the reason why that because we talked about this a couple weeks later was if he trained that guy, he's actually training a guy to take his spot or my spot, and we wouldn't want that to happen. So it wasn't like you could just look up and back then we didn't have the internet, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have anything like that. So you couldn't just post or do a search of wrestling schools. You had to really like find somebody and talk them into letting you train. And there would be some places where they would openly say, "Hey, we're going to do training Saturday morning from 12 to 2." And you'd go in there and pay whatever, $1,000, whatever, and they would beat you up. And that was it. But I mean, it was nothing like it is today. It wasn't like we do today.
So you were not a fan of pro wrestling growing up, and then you got into it later down the road in your life. What were your first impressions when you got into wrestling?
So when I watched it with my dad, I thought it was dumb. Um, when I got into it, I realized the hard work that guys actually put into it, and then the personalities and the characters, not the in-ring characters so much, but the actual people. Like one of my biggest influences, I guess, was Telly Blanchard, and the way he carried himself, and then watching him work and in the ring, and talking with him a few minutes here and there, and then Manny Fernandez and Wahoo McDaniel and those guys, um, they were the way I saw it was they were regular people just like I was, but but at the same time they were different. And so I often look back at the guy that asked to get into pro wrestling, and I look at guys today that are getting into pro wrestling, and the character, the personalities, that type of stuff is like night and day. I mean, today guys don't have that personality, that character, that color that the guys back then did. And I mean, if I was a kid breaking in or trying to get into wrestling today, I wouldn't do it because it's just not the guys today. I think Undertaker said it one time. The guys today just aren't as tough as the guys were years ago.
I totally agree with that, man, for sure, 100%.
And it's not tough, and it's not tough like I'm gonna kick your ass or anything like that. It's mentally, it's the way they carried themselves. It's their skin was thicker back then. I mean, last years ago, if you told somebody you suck, they would say something back to you. Today, if you tell somebody they suck, they would want you kicked out of the building because you're being offensive. Just the stupid stuff like that.
So, do you remember your first official match and who was it against?
So I remember like yesterday. So my job in the beginning was I would do the ring and I would sell T-shirts and ticket stuff. But on Monday nights we would do TV, and so my job on TV was to ring the bell. And if you ever watch like the Southwest Wrestling tapes from this place called the Junction, you would see a table on the right side of the screen. It's like a little small table, and there was usually a guy, me, that would stand there and ring the bell. And so my job was to get there, and the match started at 8 o'clock. So this one day, like around February, it was like February 6th, I believe. Or no, I'm sorry, it's one Monday, February 1984. Um, this guy Al Perez walks up to me. Matches are supposed to start at 8. He comes up to me at 7:45, and he says, "What size shoes do you wear?" And I said 10 and a half. He says, "What size shorts do you wear?" I said, "Medium." He says, "Come on." And I'm like, "What?" And he said, "Come on." And he takes me to the back of the dressing room. And so I'm like, "What about the bell?" He goes, "Don't worry about it. Come on with me back into the back." So we go to the back, and there's chaos back there. It's guys getting dressed, guys discussing, talking about stuff. I'm going to do this, you're going to do that, and so Jonathan Boyd and Luke Williams were the sheepherders back then. They were also the bookers. So Jonathan Boyd asked me, "What size shoes you wear? What size shorts you wear?" And I tell him, and so he shouts, he yells in the dressing room. He says, "Does anybody have a pair of 10 and a half boots?" Eric Embry pulls out a pair of black and white boots. He goes, "Here, use mine." And then he says, anybody have a pair of medium trunks?" And Bobby Fulton pulls out a pair of baby blue wrestling trunks. He goes, here, use mine." And so Luke Williams says, "Okay, you and Manny," a guy named Manny Villalobos, he said, "You and Manny Villalobos are working with me and Butch." And at the time, the Sheepers were doing the blood and gut stuff, like hardcore wrestling stuff, before we knew what hardcore was. They were the Southwest champion, world tag team champions or whatever. I mean, they were like top tier guys in the area, in the world. And so my first match was against them, and it was a 6-minute match or so. But sometimes when I think back on it, it could have been 6 seconds. Other times I look back on it, it was like 6 hours. It was just like, it just happened so fast, but at the same time it was happening so slow. But that was it. And I went to the back, and they said I did a good job. Luke Williams was very adamant about, we like to use you, but you need to get your own boots, mate, and you need to get your own trunks. And I didn't know where to get that stuff at. So they gave me an address for the boots and an address for the trunks. And the next day I called, and it cost like $150 for boots, I think, and $60 for trunks. Back then, there was only certain places you could get wrestling gear at. And if you call and said, I need a pair of boots, would ask you where you're training at and or where you're wrestling at, and they would call the promoter and to verify that
Really?
that you are this guy and you're wrestling for this promotion. And if they said no, we don't know who he is, they weren't going to help you with nothing. It wasn't like, well, we need the money because we're selling, we make boots. They weren't going to make stuff for you. And so I had to call a guy named his name was Bill Ash. He was out of Arkansas, and then the place for the trunks was K&H Wrestling. They were out of Ohio, I believe. And so yeah, that was it. And then once I got my stuff, then a guy, Ken Timms, helped me out quite a bit in doing ring stuff. Manny Fernandez, Chavo Guerrero, Nick Slater, a bunch of guys. There wasn't really a wrestling school by that time. The Southwest Wrestling Academy kind of was folding because of lack of students. So the guy Larry Lane ended up leaving the area. So in the mornings, I would meet up with these guys and get in the ring with them and do rolls and bumps and stuff like that. And Chavo helped me quite a bit. Eric Embry helped me quite a bit. Ken Timms helped me a lot. And the better I got, the more matches I got, and that's how I got started.
And you're talking about Chavo Senior, correct?
Yes, Chavo Senior.
Okay, cool. So back then, also kayfabe was a thing that was really protected. You mind talking a little bit about that?
Sure. So kayfabe was good guys and were good guys, and they hung around good guys, and they did all good guy stuff. Bad guys were bad guys, and they hung around bad guys and did bad guy stuff. Simple as that. So when we would travel, in the rare cases that I had to, like, let's say I was a good guy and Eric Embry was a bad guy. In the rare cases that I had to travel with Eric, before we'd get to the building, I would get dropped off like a block away, 2 blocks away from the building, and walk to the whatever building. Yeah, and then or vice versa. That's what we did here in Texas. Bill Watts, if he caught the good guys and bad guys traveling together, he finds you. And so I did a few shows for Bill Watts, and I think Terry Taylor got fined for traveling with Hacksaw Duggan or something. I don't remember who it was, but I was like, wow, we didn't. Joe Blanchard never did that. We did a deal where I got carried out of the ring on a stretcher, had a broken neck, and Gary Hart was the guy that set that up, and he told me, you're going to be out for a month. Don't go anywhere. Don't go to the store. Don't run errands. Stay in your apartment. Are you married? Do you have a girlfriend? I said, nope. He said, all right, we're going to find somebody to do this stuff for you. So after I stayed in my apartment for a couple of weeks. And so Gary calls me and says, all right, I'm going to send so-and-so over with a neck brace, and you're going to walk around with this neck brace for a little while.
I love it.
Yeah, man. And if I didn't follow orders, I was out. I was done. I could not, they probably wouldn't book me again. So a couple of weeks, I was in my apartment, didn't even go, like, if you know who I am, every chance I get, I go to the pool. I couldn't even go to the swimming pool. So they sent a guy named Joe Reynosa to my apartment. He had one of those foam neck braces. So I wore that. I went to the store. There was a grocery store about a mile or so from where I lived. And it just so happened I lived in the same neighborhood that Joe Blanchard lived at. So a lot of people around that area were familiar with wrestling. And Telly lived there also. So I'd go to the grocery store and people would walk up to me and like, oh my God, I saw you on TV. Are you okay? Stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, I'll be all right. I'm getting around. I'll be okay. Thank you. And when they carried me out, people were crying because even though there was no surgeon there was no real doctor. There was the guy the doctor that we had was a chiropractor. And without even touching me, without really even looking at me, he told the announcer guy and the referee, he's paralyzed. And so when he said that loud enough so people around the ring could hear. And so it was like, oh my God, Rudy Gonzalez is paralyzed. He can't move. And my job was to just lay there and not move. And they called the EMS, and the guy wanted to pull my boots off. They did take my boots off, and he wanted to stick the popsicle stick thing on my foot to see if I had any movement, and the Dr. Bowman, his name was, he said, no, he'll be, just get him to take him to my office. And again, he wasn't a doctor, he was a chiropractor. So the EMS guy was like, shouldn't he go to the emergency room? He said, no, take him to my office is 2 miles down the road, blah, 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 whatever. And so, I could, that you had to play that up as far as you could to make them believe. And so that's how it was.
Man, wrestling used to be such an art back then, especially with the kayfabe stuff. That stuff doesn't exist anymore. I wish it did, because I believe that that's what's missing in wrestling nowadays.
It exists. Guys just don't practice it. So okay, so today is Monday. Last night was the Academy Awards, right?
Right.
So did you see Will Smith slap Chris Rock?
Yes.
Was it real?
I don't think so.
Kayfabe. There you go. Is that so? Guys in other areas of entertainment are practicing kayfabe better than we are. We're the ones that are supposed to be the masters of it and that stuff. And I think it's because today a lot of kids, a lot of the kids that are in the business now, they want self gratification like now. And so one way of getting it is by immediately after your match, shake the other guy's hand to show that you're a good guy or you're a great sport or something. And we did all that stuff in the dressing room. We had great match. I'm not gonna say we, because I don't think any of my matches were great. But after our matches, we would shake hands in the back. No one ever saw that. No one ever knew that I shook. Bruiser Brody shook my hand after he, beat a mud hole in my in the ring with me. And told me, great job, kid. Thank you very much. But he did, and that meant the world to guys like me and anyone else that he had matches with and he took care of. We didn't tell anybody, oh yeah, man, Bruiser Brody took me to my greatest heights, he took me to my limits, because otherwise you're telling everybody that the match was a performance, and the matches aren't supposed to be performances. They're supposed to be competition. It's supposed to be an actual match.
Yes, I totally agree with that. So speaking of kayfabe and stuff, how would you think wrestlers back then would take to a podcast like today?
I think, and I know some guys are going to disagree with me. I think guys would eat it up. I mean, instead of me sitting there talking to you like, hey, how's it going? Whatever. You'd get promos like Terry Funk. Like one of my first matches I saw live was Telly Blanchard tore Terry Funk's ear with a hammer. Back then we didn't have internet and stuff like that. So he'd also done that same deal in Memphis and a couple other places. So if we had podcasts today, Terry Funk, if I was Terry Funk, I would have my ear patched up, and my whole podcast would be Telly Blanchard, I'm gonna come after you, that type of stuff.
Right.
And if you tried to ask, well, what are who was your biggest influences? We didn't really have influences. We did have influences, but it wasn't like, well, I want to be like Stone Cold Steve Austin, that type of stuff. My influences were Telly and Manny and Chavo and Embry, but I didn't tell people I like that guy. That's my favorite wrestler, because I didn't want people to say, he's trying to be like whoever. I wanted to still be my own person,
Right.
and be me. But parts of my matches, parts of my work is a little bit of this guy, a little bit of that guy, a little bit of that guy, a little bit of that guy. Today, I mean, guys are like, yeah, I was inspired to wrestle because I saw Bret Hart, whatever. And it's just a different, from back then, it's a different way of looking at the business. I'm not saying today's wrong, but I know I compared this to when I was breaking in. I was living on my own. I was making decent money, doing the kayfabe stuff. But today there's a lot of guys, there's a lot of wrestlers out there, and there's a lot of guys that have part-time jobs and live with their parents and struggling and that type of stuff. And at the same time, they're wondering why they're not making any money, why they're struggling the way they are. But then they go on Saturday night and after their match, and they go on social media and say, "Oh, I want to thank blah 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 for the great match we had." And after that, in that match, people saw them kick each other, throw each other out of the ring, uh, drop each other on their heads, basically trying to kill each other. And then they're going to say thank you at the end. Doesn't make sense.
So let's talk a little bit about your training history. Not a lot of people know that you used to be a trainer for the Shawn Michaels Wrestling Academy, where my favorite wrestler was trained, Brian Danielson. Mind talking a little bit about that?
Sure. Actually, what happened was in October of '98, I had quit wrestling, and I just got tired of. I love the wrestling business. I don't like some of the people that are in the business. There's a lot of shady stuff that goes on. But I mean, if you, um, let's say, so I compare wrestling to personal experiences. So you have a girlfriend, but she picks her nose, uh, she burps, she's rude, but you love her for whatever reason. You're in love with her. Um, for whatever reason, I fell in love with wrestling. It's what I did, but there's a lot of shady stuff that goes on, but I still kept doing what I was doing because I was in love with the business. Finally, I got to a point where I said, "Screw this! I'm done. I'm out of here," and I quit. So in October or so of '98, I quit the business. That very same week, coincidentally, Shawn Michaels called me up and said, "Hey, I want you to run my school. I want you to help run my school." And we talked about it. I said, "Let me think about it." I had just gotten a job working at a grocery store warehouse where I was making like $12 an hour and stuff, and working 60 hours a week, and a lot more, far more money than I was making wrestling. Um, so we talked about it. And he was going to actually start school in April of '99. He was going to have back surgery and all that stuff, and so um, I said, "All right." So uh, I worked at the warehouse October, November, December, January, February, March, 6 months, and I was making good money. We had just bought a house, uh, and so then we started the wrestling school. And the very first day, bam, I was I was hooked again. And so I had between the time I quit and I started at Shaw School, I didn't touch wrestling. I didn't watch wrestling. I didn't nothing wrestling. I'd get a phone call occasionally from Sean. Okay, we're going to start this day. Hey, what do you think about if we do this? Hey, what do you think about if we do that? But I didn't watch it. So the first day of training, it was just like watching. It was me, a guy named Ken Johnson, and Jose Lothario, and watching the guys doing what they're doing, and everything that they were doing was what I did 20 years before. Just didn't know anything about rolls or bumps or you know just completely green. And I enjoyed it. And so we trained for like a week, and I was trying to at the time I was doing I was working 12 midnight to like 10 o'clock the next morning or something. Sleep for a little bit and then go train from 6 to I'm sorry, yes, 6 to 8. Go home and change, go to go work at the warehouse. And so after a week I was blown, I was tired. So I made the decision to stop working at the warehouse. Why? Because so when I finally told my kid's mom at the time, uh, why she went nuts. She was going to kill me. Uh, and I just told her, hey, I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy making. I was making 1,300 a week or whatever. I mean, good money. I wasn't happy. I didn't care for the. I don't know. I just you know punching in every day and go do this, go do that, and then somebody else is not doing their job. So then the new guy would have to cover his ass or whatever. Um, and at Sean's, it was like I was doing something I'd been doing at that point. I had been doing the wrestling for I think like 20 years, 15, 16 years, something like that. Anyway, and so the wrestling was a lot harder physically than what I was doing at the warehouse. The warehouse, I was just grabbing stuff, merchandise, and putting it in backs in baskets and putting it on a semi truck. I didn't have to bump. I didn't have to uh, jump up and down. I didn't have to run the ropes back and forth. It was a lot more physically demanding doing the wrestling stuff, and I was making less money, far less money. But it's what I enjoyed doing. So the first group that Sean had was Brian Danielson, Brian Kendrick, Lance Cade, Shooter Schultz, a guy named John Hope. There was this big kid. His name was Kevin. I don't think it was I can't think of his last name, but he resembled very closely to Kane. He played for the Washington Redskins. He was on the practice squad, and then he tore his knee up, and then he recovered from his knee injury. Then he joined Sean's school. There's a kid named Brian. I can't think of his last name, but he played for the Washington Huskies and huge. I mean, he was like 6'4" something and about 240, 250 or so. And he could flip. He could, lay on his back and kick back up. He could do hand flips. I mean, he was very athletic for a guy his size. And Sean just told him, just keep at it, learn this stuff, and you'll make some in his business. But he had a bad attitude, so he ended up leaving. And there's some like the first guys that we trained at Sean's that made it was Brian Kendrick, Brian Danielson, Lance Cade, Shooter Schultz. 4 guys right off the bat. But out of the first 2 or 3 classes that we had, which was about 60 guys, there was at least 40 that were very, very good. They just missed something. I don't know, maybe they didn't have enough dedication. Maybe they just something different. They were just missing something. Maybe not enough. Their attitude wasn't there. Maybe they showed up too late a couple of times to training. Maybe they missed training a couple of times, but there were a lot of good kids there. And those 4 were the ones that were there every day. They trained after training. When we needed a ring set up or tore down, they were the first ones to grab the stuff to set up. They were the last ones to make sure everything was torn down and nothing was left behind. And if we said jump, they would ask how high. I mean, they were like, and picking those guys was very difficult also because, in the beginning, Sean asked me for just one guy, who do you think deserves a tryout with WWE or WWF at the time? And I'm like, let me think, and so when it came time, I finally told him, hey man, I can't pick one guy. He goes, these are the guys that I picked 4, which was the 4 that I mentioned. I said, you pick one. And a couple of days later, he said, hey, let me see if Vince will let me put all 4 in. And so that's how they got their tryout and they got signed.
Nice. That's a great story. Last question. Are you still involved in the wrestling business somehow? And what's in your future if you are?
So when Sean re-signed his contract in 2001, he passed over the school to me. And so I've been running the school since then. So yes, I'm still involved. Part of the school is I also do shows that feature the students. There's so many schools out there though. So, guys it's not, there's other places to choose from. So what I do also is I go to shows and I watch the matches. Some of the guys, when they see me out there, they'll come up afterwards and say, hey, what'd you think of this? How'd you think of my match? What did I do here? What did I do there? What would you have done? How could I do? I help critique guys. Some guys, because they live so far away, they can't. I'm not gonna say they can't. They can. They don't. They're not able to attend the Texas Wrestling Academy. So they'll send me matches. They'll ask for ideas. Workout stuff. Can you help me? Who do I contact about getting a look or a tryout or whatever? I've been called to the Performance Center twice to
Nice.
they do like a week at a time as a guest trainer. I was a guest trainer at OVW with Al Snow. COVID just kind of messed everything up. It kind of like put everything on hold, and the WWE whole deal is completely different than what it was in 2019 before COVID hit. So it kind of threw things out of whack a little bit. But I mean, part of wrestling, man, is just adjusting and just rolling with the punches. Um, so yeah, still doing the wrestling stuff. Still, where am I going to be in the future? I don't know. Probably still doing this. I don't know.
Man, I gotta say, I can tell you have a lot of stories. We definitely have to come have you back on the show, man, for sure.
Anytime, man. I'm sorry about coming on so late. I'm not computer savvy, so it took me a while to figure out the Skype stuff and whatever. You kept saying click on this, and every time I kept clicking on it, it said something like not a account not found, or I don't know. So I just was messing with it.
Well,
But yeah, whenever.
I'm glad you figured it out and that you're on here now, man. I really appreciate it.
No problem, man. Whenever you get a chance or you need to kill some time, whatever, just let me know.
So, where can our fans follow you on social media, if you don't mind?
Mainly on Facebook, Texas Wrestling Academy, Facebook page, or Rudy Boy Gonzalez Facebook page, or Texas Wrestling Entertainment Facebook page. Um, if anybody's out there, you have questions to ask or whatever, or you're interested in the school, just message me. If you want to send an email, Texas Wrestling Academy _SA, like San Antonio, at yahoo.com. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I'm open to whatever. If anyone has questions or stuff like that, I'm more than happy to help out, the younger guys and try and keep this business going as it is.
We appreciate you coming on our show. I really, really appreciate it. We have to have you back on someday. And you fans, don't forget to follow my friend Rudy Gonzalez. Check out the Texas Wrestling Academy and check us out on Facebook, 5 Star Revolution Podcast. Mr. Rudy Gonzalez, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great night, man.
Thank you.